Hello, everyone. My name is Isaac Scott, and I am the president of the board of directors for the Justice Arts Coalition.
Hey everyone, Brett Gonzalez, Vice President of the Board of Directors for Justice Arts Coalition.
How you doing, Brett?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. How about you, Isaac?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited about this discussion we're about to have. I'm excited for a number of reasons. I think excited to just really be active for the Justice Arts Coalition and really being able to bring a lot of my own experience and expertise to the work to see how it can be beneficial, but also just building with other leaders. So I'm interested to just like hear from you, learn more from you and the work you've been doing as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm grateful to be here. Usually, in the past, years past, when I've been in these spaces with Jack, I've been the only person that was, either currently experiencing incarceration or anything like that. So it's nice to be in a place where there's someone else that can kind of understand, bits of where I'm coming from because, you've gone through, similar things, right? Everyone goes through very different things. But it's awesome to be in an environment like that where like both of us here kind of have that connection and so many times I'm in meetings and you know everyone else is there for like their own personal beliefs in abolition or justice reform or however they want to frame it. But they're always just like, oh, I've come to this work first, then I've met people that experienced it, and it's nice to be in a place right now where it's just us and we know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I really do appreciate you saying that. I also come out of spaces where I'm usually like one or a few between when it comes to the people who are system impacted in the room. And while the work a lot of times seems to be centered around us, it doesn't sort of feel that way all of the time. So yeah, so I appreciate spaces and moments like this. Yeah, yeah. But I would love to know I guess a little bit more about how you. I know we've kind of talked about this before, but tell us, for people who don't know, how did you get connected with the Justice Arts Coalition? Because I sit as the president today, but there was a time where you were the president. We were just talking about this, so I would love to just hear about that, and then just a little bit about leadership and what has been your experience?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Real quick intro. I wasn't an artist in any kind of way coming into prison. And a friend really encouraged me to take up arts as a way to kind of express my experiences. And inside, I met somebody else who had just they're just finished. They're finishing up their sentence. They've done 20 years, and so far when I met them and they had a BFA, from like the 1970s, and I actually got to mentor with them for about 6 years before they left, and it was amazing to be able to learn art and understand all these different ways that I can, you know, express the experiences I was going through. And when they left, I felt really like disconnected from the art world and the art community because this person was like my only connection to the art world. And I started reaching out to random organizations, and Jack was the only one to respond back to me. And that was awesome. I very quickly got my work shown, like in like their first exhibit, which was really entertaining and just such a freeing moment. But my path towards leadership came when in that first show, um, the Washington Post had a reporter there that wanted to do a magazine article about arts inside the carceral system, and it was going to have people, different a page per artist and show their work, and they asked if I could be a part of that. And so I was super excited, and I sat there and waited and waited and waited for this authorization form to come in so I could start talking to this reporter, and it never happened. And I finally found out that the format that this reporter wanted to do was they wanted to have like artwork, the name of the artist, their charge, and how long they've been in prison. And the reason why I was in prison did not fit the narrative of what they wanted in their article, so I was no longer invited anymore into the article. And it was how I expressed my frustration in that moment, but also how I saw a world where we actually could have hard conversations. And we're not looking for just like the easiest fruit off that tree to talk about, right? But talk about the whole tree and talk about everything that's going on. That led to an invitation for me to join the board of directors of Jack themselves. And so that was like my first step into leadership was navigating that disappointment in that moment, but also like envisioning a future of the conversations that can be had, that really need to be had. And so that's kind of what got me there. How about you? Like I know when I met you, you were much further along in your journey than I was. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing all of that, Brett. Thank you for sharing all that, Brett. And I'm sorry that you had to experience that. Although I am very grateful for what came out of it and that perseverance. I was introduced to the Justice Arts Coalition in, I believe, 2022. I was doing some work. I think I was on a panel discussion with at Trinity College, and I was on a panel discussion with the former ED of the Justice Arts Coalition, and we connected that way. I was already doing work with the Confined Arts, which is a program that I created during my time at Columbia University and sort of developed it there while I was a Justice and Education scholar. And we also have an Arts Justice Safety Coalition that came out of, the confined arts. And I know these acronyms, they can get confusing at times, right? Because we have here the Justice Arts Coalition, and then you also have the Arts Justice Safety Coalition. But essentially, those two coalitions came together and formed what we now have is the Art Plus Justice National Collective. And that was my introduction to the Justice Arts Coalition and being introduced to their network. I also, a lot of the work, it's not too many of us nationally. I mean, we've grown and I appreciate this, but I've been doing this work since 2013, really doing art and criminal justice work. And the population is growing and growing and growing. So everyone kind of really knows each other. It's not too, so a lot of folks who we were working on with, who also helped form the Arts Justice Safety Coalition was also familiar with the convenings of the Justice Arts Coalition. So it was already some sort of understanding of the work being done in these different spaces. And even I saw back in my I was looking in my emails because I'm doing some trademarking work. I looked back and I saw that I had spoken to, or at least sent some information about, fiscal sponsorship over to the Prison Arts Coalition before they, started to formalize themselves. So I was just like, wow, look at the networking that was even taking place back then. So, you know, um, but fast forward to now, I was then asked to join the board in 2024. I began in January. And I've been on since then, and it's been a blessing, I will say, in my life to be able to be, positioned with an organization that is already doing, work with people in prison. It's not easy to sustain relationships from the inside to the outside. So I've always admired Jack's capacity and ability to be able to, sustain and work with artists on the inside. So it's been a blessing to serve as the board president. Yeah, yeah. Cool. And I guess something I would want to ask you is in since you've been working with Jack, and not even just with Jack, just working as an organizer, doing work in the prisons. Because one of the things you didn't mention is that you were in prison for a long time while you were working with Jack, you know.
Yeah.
Um, how has the leadership, what has been some challenges rather that you faced in leadership as a justice impacted person that you really want to bring to the table these days?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I was on the board for 4 years while I was incarcerated, including having the same role of president at one point, which having the head of the board being incarcerated was definitely challenges, and I super appreciate everyone's patience, care that went into making that possible. But yeah, there's definitely, you know there's a lot of talk about like the ease, equality and equitableness, and all these things, like, what it is. And, the reality is that when I'm inside, I don't have access like everyone else does to resources or even the meetings. And so it takes a lot more work to bring someone that's in the inside to the same level, the same playing field as everyone else. There's a lot of things that kind of go forgotten in communication. Even to be able to see people when I'm in meetings, when inside, I'm on a wall phone, and someone else that's in the Zoom meeting has me on their speakerphone. And so while they're seeing each other's expressions and there's a chat going on the side, like I didn't even know chat was a thing, like happening in these Zoom meetings. Um, uh, I can only hear what people are saying, and I don't know when to speak. And so it takes a lot to kind of overcome those limitations. And the problem is how to overcome those limitations without like treating the person inside almost as a child, right? Like, sometimes carving out specific space for people inside to talk, like not gives them an opportunity to talk, but also funnels them into only being able to talk when you say they can talk. There's this real back and forth danger of giving access and choosing when they have access. And so that's like the delicate balance that I found. And I don't know if there's really good solutions for that. You know, I, in my own experience, there was a real exhaustion that happens after so many years of that. And I think the exhaustion comes from that this is all new and that there's nothing like really proven out or written out that people can reference and just go back to a shared understanding. When you're constantly having to make things new on the fly, it becomes tiring for everyone. And I'm curious, like, how have you experienced that since getting out? Like, do you experience similar things?
Yeah, I was just taking notes over here and I'm like, yep, you hitting it on the nose. I wrote it down as we're given space but not power. We're invited into the space, we're allowed to be in the room so that we can be referenced for the sake of the work. And here's a living person, here's a living example of what we're talking about. But then we're sort of pushed to the side when it comes to really decision making, to being able to really guide discussions, guide ideologies, guide philosophies, and really just inform, spaces, and because, it's one of the one of the more difficult things to deal with is being a former incarcerated person who needs money, straight up. If so, when you need the money that this organization is paying you, it makes it that much harder for you to sort of challenge some of the limitations, as you put it, that you are coming against. So you may see that they want to work in a certain way that may be counterproductive, and you want to offer feedback or help lead and guide in certain ways, but you're not offered that level of, space. So you have space in the room, but not space in the decision making. So those are some of the challenges that I've faced, and I've been in a lot of different spaces since I've been home as a leader. It's not always been that. And that is part of the advocacy, that we are responsible for. And that's a lot of the work that I've been, trying to do, and have been doing. Let me not say trying to do, have been doing and really working towards there really being justice impacted leadership, you know,
Mhm.
and it really being we are represented in the leadership. So not just, you don't just have a name or two of us on the board, or you don't have a name or two of us at the executive leadership levels, but that there is a number of people from different backgrounds with different lived experiences who can help shape and guide the perspective, especially in today's culture. So yeah, that would be, how I see, some of the, excuse me, that would be some of the, challenges that I've seen, you know. Um, but I guess I guess, in that note, let me ask you this then. What does justice impacted leadership look like in practice and not in theory? What would that look like in like everyday work?
You know, something that comes to mind when you were talking, and something that really hits me, is this idea of uh, not just performative work, right, from a person who's impacted, but like there's this amazing book that Pen America put out, The Sentences That Create Us, and it's a bunch of people talking about how they became writers and have like sustained writer work while incarcerated. But the number one message that I got from it, the underlying message, right, that's not maybe said exact, but is runs through every one of those articles, is that in order to be worked with, we have to be pleasant. We have to provide the best experience possible for those other people because they can just not answer any of our communications. They don't have to answer our phone calls. They don't have to answer our emails. So we have to be like a great experience for them. And by being able to be a great experience, we now no longer get to be fully ourselves. And I think there's a real danger of thinking that once people inside or outside that have experiences say something that's perhaps opposing what other people are thinking, it's interpreted as being negative, right? Like, oh, well, you're just complaining. You're just doing this. And I actually think that like being critical of one's allies is actually a first step towards learning how to have like full autonomy in one's like opinion. Right? Like I can't just inside, I can't say what I'm really thinking anytime, right? Cops aren't going to like it, right? Other groups of people aren't going to like it, right? There's politics constantly in play. You can't just say whatever you want. There's consequences of things. And so I have to be really like a person with different masks, and I put on these different masks while speaking. But when I get to be critical of my allies and be able to say, hey, I don't like kind of what's going on, and this is why, that is giving me a space to learn to be critical again. And then I can use that same skills when going out into the bigger picture, right? Like how to make changes in our society and how to start to like be, make my own decisions and express myself authentically. And I think that's really the big change, right? Is like these steps on creating a safe place. I hate the word safe place because it's so often misused, but be able to fully express that, right? And maybe it doesn't look good and maybe it doesn't look nice in this moment, but that's because it's a pathway towards being able to be a full person again and being able to fully express myself. And have you had experience like that where you felt like people maybe thought of you as kind of the negative person in the room when you're supposed to be the one that's like the cheerleader?
Yeah, I got it. I'm working with a double. Unfortunately, I'll say I'm working with a double negative as being a black man and then being formerly incarcerated. So I'm already stereotyped as being hostile, and so much more because I'm formerly incarcerated that I have to be mindful of how my passion shows up in a space. It can't be too much. I can't get over emotional. I can't be under emotional because then I come across as callous, right? If I overdo it, then I come across as emotional. So I don't have a space where I'm able to have the trauma acknowledged and
Mhm.
understood as I work, right? As I come through, because I believe that the understanding is that when you come home, you're healed. When you come home, everything is fixed. When you come home, you should be good now. They've let you come home, you're good now. And that is just the next step in, reentry is a forever process. I've been home 12 years now. Not November, 2 weeks ago, I celebrated 12 years home. And I'm still in my reentry process. I've done a lot of things. I've hit the ground running, but I'm still in reentry. I'm still rebuilding my life after incarceration. You know, um, and a lot of times spaces don't offer us the grace to be able to do that, you know, especially when we're being worked in a system that has already sort of hit us on one end. Now we're on the reentry end, sort of getting, worked in a way where our lived experiences are not really understood or sort of cared for in this step of the process. So we've gone through the incarceration process, which what we would say is the punitive part of it. Now we're home, and this should be my reintegration, my rebuilding, my resituating, and it's not always, the land and the ground is not tilled for that. People are not ready, to receive you back in. They're not ready to receive you back in, although the space says it is. And that's the issue. And that, hey, we work for you guys, we are about you guys, but if you understood us guys all the time, or us gals, or us people with these lived experiences, there would be a different level of attention and caregiving. Um, and that's where I see is lacking. But to that question of what does justice leader impacted leadership look like in practice and not theory? I would say really making space for people who have that lived experiences to make decisions and to trust their leadership. So to give them opportunity, so it's not just you ever seen someone say, well, since I can't lead, I'll just give it to you and I won't do nothing. It's not that. It's giving a person the room to lead, but also being there to guide them in those decisions, but trusting the direction that they are taking things in, with respects to the organization, the structure, the mission, the goals, all of those things taken into consideration. So that leadership in practice for me really looks like making the space a lot more of a collaborative space, not just in hey, and not in just a performative way, as you very well put it. You know what I mean? So that's what I would that's kind of what I'm thinking about on that note. Yeah, yeah. But we are yeah, I'm sorry, God, see you come off mute. Go ahead,
Uh,
please.
I'm just excited about this conversation because there's so much to it. And yeah, I can't help thinking of the meetings I've been in where, there's people with lived experience that are in the room and how they don't have the title, they don't have the decision making. They're referenced to give information by the leaders. The leaders talking, they didn't say, "Oh, is this accurate or is this correct?" And really, they just want like confirmation of what they already know. And so I think that one of the dangers is by creating those environments, right, and not giving people the ability to have actual leadership. Um, that the people that are coming out, at least several people that I've met, right, that have come out in other spaces, they have to adopt these roles, right? They have to really play into this infrastructure that already exists in order to become a leader. And so it creates some like a disconnect between what what their experience might have them do and now how they have to be a leader, right, and almost ignore it. I had this really interesting conversation with this person. She was incarcerated. She was out. I was still incarcerated, and we're talking about language. And people really had a problem because at the time I said the word inmate, right? That's how we would situate. Like it's generic, right? You don't have to worry about convict or prisoner or any of that stuff, right? Just um, hey, I saw someone in your room. Well, who's in your room, right? Hey, I saw an inmate in your room, right? That makes a difference between I saw a cop in your room, right? There's differences, just how we quickly speak. And people were having kind of issues with my use of that language. I wasn't even aware that, some people had problems. And so this person was telling me how I should just call people people, right? And how I should go inside while I'm inside. Um, Anytime someone says the word inmate, I should say, ouch, that hurts. And while that would probably maybe work on the outside, being in a men's prison, right? Me going, ouch, that hurts would create a radically different response on the outside, right? And so here's a person with lived experience who probably, before entering into the system, would never have told me this, right? Would know that this isn't going to work. But because they've fully taken on these mantles and thought processes of people that haven't experienced it are now saying this is kind of how we do things, it's producing this weird conversation, right? Like I mean, it's unrealistic for me to do that. And so, yeah, I wonder, like, have you noticed those kind of like people kind of like hoping you take on different language or hoping that you take on different ideas in order to be like more like acceptable within the system that already exists?
Oh man, you're gonna get me in trouble here, Brett. Oh man. So listen, man, I've since I've been home, I've been working in predominantly white institutions, and unfortunately, the culture is to conform to the space, conform to the system, conform to the structure, and I've had to learn how to survive, if you will. You know, I've had to learn how to be able to work in a space, work with the space under their rules, regulations, and their mission, so not being outside of the mission of what they want to do, but also in a way standing my own ground and saying, hey, I can't do that, or I don't do it that way, or I won't work this way. And yes, it has isolated whenever you stand up for what's right, you're going to be alone. Whenever, if you read about leaders all throughout history, leadership is a lonely road. It's a lonely route, So I've learned to embrace that as it relates to being able to make tough decisions. And sometimes those tough decisions are just standing up for what you know is right and standing up for your own work, your own principles with respects, to your own lived experience and the work. And one of the other things with that, I would say is that I've learned that my experience is not everyone's experience with incarceration. So that's very important to also understand. So I try not to, it depends on what we're talking about, where I'm not compromising or I am compromising, or I don't, or we don't have to call it compromising. We can say negotiating, working with each other, because it's not just about the paycheck. It really is about, I'm not going to just get paid to, continue to do something that I know is going to be ultimately harmful. It's not, I can't do it. I do need the money. I do need to pay my bills. I do got kids. I have things I need to take care of. Again, I'm in my reentry phase, but my heart and my spirit won't just let me, just do and conform to everything, and I also know when you have to step away from a space, and that's important too as a leader. And that's one of the things that, I would always want justice impacted folks to understand, that it's okay to step away from a space if it is not a part of your healing, because you're still healing. And if you're in a workspace, it's just like you don't even got to be justice impacted. If you work at a place that's bringing you mental and physical pain, you don't need to be dealing with it. Mental or physical pain, you don't need to be dealing with it. So it's the same, concept coming home, understanding like, hey, that's why it's important to work with organizations that are aligned with your mission, your heart mission, your goal. What do you want to do? What are those things you said you wanted to do when you came home? Start to pursue those things, because then you can better align yourself with agencies and organizations and people that will help you develop as a leader as well. They won't always just ask you to conform. They will say, hey, this is how we do it, but we want to hear what you're saying. And this is one thing my pastor always said. Every time someone new joins the church, he says, we're a different church now because of you, right? Because of what you bring to the table. And that's the idea all the time. It's like when we bring a new person in, we become different because that new person brings in something that we didn't have before. That's only can be true if we allow them to develop in the space and not just force them to conform. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's how I would breathe that out. Yeah. I know we're coming to the end. I just had two more questions I wanted us to just really talk about. Um Also just want to just take a moment to thank everybody who's taking the time to listen, to this discussion. We do want to offer different tools, workshops, and resources to our community. And we wanted to start with justice impacted leadership. We wanted to do that for the sake of the folks who are bringing in justice impacted people, but also so that justice impacted folks pursuing leadership have some more perspective. They can also think through some of the things we're talking about and be able to better position themselves and better re-enter, if you will. But one of the questions, Brett, I wanted to ask you is in lines with what we're talking about, what responsibilities do you feel you may carry as a justice impacted leader in this work?
I think that, you know, I don't know if the survivor guilt's really the right word, right? But I'm very aware of the people that I absolutely love and care about that are still inside. And I bring that with me throughout the day. And so I think that's really kind of like my understanding, right? Is when I come into these spaces and I talk about like things I think maybe could be happening, right? Or should be happening. It's not because like I personally would like to see that happen, or that like, I think that's just a cool idea, but I'm doing it with the understanding that there's people, very much like me and people that I love that are still inside that are being affected by these things. And so when I make these suggestions, it's not because I just want to do it, it's because I'm thinking about other people and they come with me in every one of those decisions. And I think what you said is very true about how like my experience is not the same as everyone else's, right? So I don't want to like pigeonhole only my experience onto decisions, but I want to always be asking like, how does this affect everyone else? And so I think that's really what I bring with me. How about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for that. I feel I'm you this is so perfect, man, because you touch right on it with respects to how the work we do out here impacts people in there. When we think about, the non-traditional approach to human and healing justice, some of the work of Eddie Ellis, a lot of it was making sure that the communities that people come from are involved in the work that happens in prison because they're coming back out, right? To those same communities. In the same way, I would, lens out on that and say, you know, uh, the work we do out here is going to directly impact people in there, either positively or negatively. And it is important that when we talk about leadership development, that doesn't just start when a person comes home. We develop leadership starts in the prison. I started, working. My first committee and board I sat on was the inmate grievance committee. I did that at two different prisons, and that helped me out so much um, just in advocacy. I really learned how to, advocate for people in a very professional way. My mother always taught me how to write and write complaints. So at this point, it really became real evident where, they all just came together. But I understood how to read complaints, how to show the folks I was living with, how do you write a complaint and avoid retaliation. I was able to go to these meetings. We're sitting. I'm not sure if they do it the same way in the feds, but you got two inmate grievance representatives across from two administrative representatives. So one is a captain, one is an officer, and then you have the chair, who's probably another person serving time. But you know, people are generally scared of the police, so they're not really trying to, if the police are like, no, we want to deny this, People on the other end are not really like, because they're not really trying to push back because you got to deal with the police later, and that wasn't me, and that wasn't the environment I'll say I walked into either in either prison that I served in. I did stand up, and that was very much respected. I also understood when to fall back, you know what I mean? Because I understood like this is a very arbitrary system and you'll end up in the box with everybody else. You know what I mean? And you won't be able to advocate. Then they'll have someone here who who really won't push back on anything, right? So being in prison is where my leadership development started. It helped me to be able to advocate and make sense of how do I advocate for right or wrong? How do we, in these spaces, how do I think strategically with people of power when I'm in a space where I don't have any power? That's important because we still sit in a lot of our spaces out here where we don't have much power and we're fighting against a system that seems to be a really high wall. Where's my leverage at? How do I advocate? How do we still make progress? So I feel like it is our responsibility to create awareness, education, for folks who are in prison coming home. I wish I could be in parole talking to people about their first job and encouraging them about, the differences between starting your own nonprofit versus starting your own business, your own LLC. Because there's a lot of misconceptions about how they could do work, how they can be successful in their work. Also, I think a lot of people, I don't think I know that a lot of folks have been hurt in the nonprofit work, being used, being exploited. And that is something that you're not prepared for coming home because you get accepted with so much love because they need you financially, right? And then, when you get your feelings hurt because there's really no space for you to offer any ideas or anything like that, it hurts. How I feel it is our responsibility to really like inform, folks coming home, right? And folks inside, hey, here's what the industrial landscape looks like. Here's how you can prepare. Here's how you should be thinking about it. And I also think it's our responsibility to inform organizers who work in these prisons with people. If you are working with people, you are responsible in a way. And I believe that you have to be working towards leadership development, and that is transitioning a person from, that incarcerated space to a post-incarcerated space. And that may seem like a heavy lift, but I feel like if you're doing this work, then that's what you signed up for. So I hate to place a heavy burden on people, but I feel like that's what I feel my responsibilities are. You know what I mean? So that's how I would answer that question. But one more question. Just taking us out of here. And I'm so glad we did this conversation. This was a great idea. Thank you again for this idea. What do you hope, people walk away with tonight? This is our first discussion coming out of our first virtual gala. This will be a quarterly event. We will have different topics and different presentations and ways we will, present information and articulate different philosophy and understanding. But what do you hope people walk away with tonight?
I, yeah, that's a great question. I think two things. One is that Jack has always been about trying completely different kind of models and trying different things. And that's still very much alive today, as evidence is what we're doing right now. This is similar in some ways, the things that we've done in the past, but it's different in other ways. And I think the biggest difference is that before where we'd ask people with lived experience to be certain speakers or have certain places within convenings or events or something like this. Um, and we've done an amazing job of bringing in a whole bunch of different people while still incarcerated into these spaces, right? But this time it's flipped on its head, right? It's us that are bringing everyone who's never experienced incarceration into this space. we're not being brought in. No, no, we're bringing you in. And I think that's a really big like innovation in this in some ways. And I think it's just a continuation of Jack's story about how it's continuing to try new things and try to grow and trying to say that some of the solutions to the problems that we're experiencing may best be understood by people who've experienced the consequences of these things. And two, and this is the thing that I want to say like 1,000 times. I wish everyone could hear, is that if me and you are ever in a meeting, and I say something that perhaps comes off as like challenging or like ungrateful to the work that you're doing, please know that I'm not. I'm incredibly grateful for all the work that you're doing. I love that you're in this space, and there's so much room. There's so many people inside. There's so much more room for people on the outside to help. Right? That you have the space to help, and I'm grateful for it. But I'm just expressing my opinion. And please don't take it as any kind of like slight towards your work, you as a human being. Th this is about something greater than me. It's greater than everyone, right? It's an entire system that's been building this, right? We look at Foucault and how they talked about this is not a system that was created by accident, but it was a system that was created by thoughtful plannings and actions. And so, in order to kind of dismantle that or challenge that, we got to sometimes say loud, big things, right? That might hurt, like my own ego. And so, please just um, eh, give grace and space for things to be said, and understand that it's not personal, and that it's about something bigger. And let's keep on building and do these things. I think that's the biggest takeaways that I can offer. How about you, Isaac?
Thank you for saying all of that, Brett. I want to echo everything you said. I will also add to that, not many spaces are just, you know, not many conversations rather happen just between system impacted people, people who have lived experience with incarceration, where they're able to just talk and breathe out experiences and share stories. So I pray that this conversation can be beneficial to people, um, understanding, that we are formerly incarcerated people. We are people who spent a number of years in prison. I spent almost a decade, a little more than 9 years, and you did a little more than a decade. This is a lot of time out of our lives. The work is it hits us differently, and that is not unique to us too. That is unique to everyone who has had their own lived experience. And it may be too heavy alongside of the organizational work that you have to do to sort of also balance this. Well, what do we do with all of that along with this huge pile of paperwork I have? It'll make sense as you allow, the people you work with to lean in as leaders, and lean in as thought partners, and not just as props, and not just as, the wild stories for fundraising events and different, events, and different things like that. But one of the things I hope people walk away with tonight is a desire to donate to Jack and donate to the Justice Arts Coalition. We need your donations. We need your help to stay connected with our people, with the artists on the inside nationally. We need your support to be able to continue doing our Art Plus Justice National Collective work. I do invite you to take a scroll down our YouTube channel and take a look at the last convening, which took place on November 13th. It was a great event, and we're looking forward to having another one in January. So I am hoping that people walk away with tonight, again, with the desire to support Jack, and also share, this organization and its work, with your friends, with partners, with supporters. Jack is about we celebrating 5 years, as a nonprofit, and we've, walked through some challenging times as an organization, and we're keeping moving forward. We're keeping our work going with the folks in prison. And we're going to continue to work towards bringing visibility to their work, their lived experiences, their current challenges. We're going to continue to advocate. We're going to continue to do the work that, we feel we are called to do. So thank you very, very